Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I'm here with part 2 of my May wrap up. So the second half of the books I read in May. This video is actually going to be longer than I intended to. Even though I made a part 1, I ended up reading quite a few books at the end of May, so that was good in terms of my reading, and quite a few of those were actually really good as well. So let's get right to it. The first book that I finished after the last one in part 1 was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This was recommended by Shannon at That So Po. I love reading cozy mysteries, and I also love it when it includes older people. This one for me was a 3-star read. It was really solid. Parts of the mystery and of the community got a little lost, a little boring at times for me, but overall it delivered on the coziness, it delivered on the mystery, and it was really interesting. The next book that I finished was Run, Rose, Run by Dolly Parton. This was a book that I read from my book club with, I went into it not expecting a ton, and I was not disappointed in that. Yeah, there's just, I think if you're a fan of Dolly Parton, you're gonna like it. If you're a fan of kind of fast thrillers, you might like this one. There was clear parts where, like, it was clear Dolly Parton had, contributed parts where she had about the music industry, about Nashville, things like that. Those parts were interesting. The rest of it was a bit meh. So that was a 2 out of 5 stars read for me. The next book I finished was Flirting with Fate by Jayci Cervantes. This is a young adult contemporary romance. I did not like Jayci Cervantes' first book, the first book I read by her, which was in middle grade. But I wanted to give her another chance. And Flirting with Fate, I thought was much better. Part of the problem I had with the other book was a lot of ableism. I didn't see that here. However, I a lot of young adult contemporary romances just are not my cup of tea at the moment. So this was a solid book. It was really interesting. It had a lot of heart. It's got some magic elements at the end that bring things together really nicely. And the story between the protagonist and the hero was pretty cute. I really liked the hero. Yeah, just a solid read for me. The next book I finished was The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa, and this is a really fun book. Mia Sosa is like an expert rom-com writer. Like, she hits all the beats in this book. It's funny. I read in I think it was in the acknowledgments, and she's talked about how this was a book written during the pandemic, and that it was one of the most difficult books she's had to write, because there was a lot of rewriting, a lot of getting things right. And I think that shows in the actual book. Some things feel a little bit mechanical, but it's still really enjoyable. It's funny. It's got a really interesting sex scene at like a kind of sex club. Yeah. I think that's the scene most people will talk about in this book. But anyways, it was a 4-star read for me because Sosa's just a really brilliant writer, and writes really nice, really solid, good sex scenes. The next book I finished, I read as an eARC from Netgalley. This is Booked on a Feeling by Jayci Lee. I have one of Lee's other books on my TBR. It's on my shelf sitting over there waiting to be read. But because this one was going to, it was an ARC, I read it first. And it was a really solid, really nice book. It was really sweet. It's kind of a closed door romance, so you don't get a lot of explicit sex scenes. Like, there's sex scenes, but you don't get to all the body part elements of it. That's important for romance readers to know. You want to know what level of like sex there is in these books. This was a really sweet, friends to lovers, slow-paced book. So it's a very, very slow burn. There's a lot of explanation at the beginning that felt like it was too slow. And then at the end, things were rushed a little bit. So the pacing was off for me. But there's a lot of scenes at a bookstore. The hero is really sweet. The heroine is a woman who is has realized that maybe she doesn't want to be a lawyer, and she's in this high-paced career, high stress, and that maybe it's not for her. And that aspect I really enjoyed. Like people being allowed to just change careers even when they're being successful is a theme I really like in my romance novels. The next book I finished was also an eARC from Netgalley, and this is Twice a Quinceañera by Yamile Saied Méndez. And I've been meaning to read, where is it, Furia by Méndez, but again, I read Twice a Quinceañera. It starts off with a called off wedding. A wedding is scheduled, it's called off like a week or two before the actual wedding. And our heroine is a Latinx successful woman, a successful lawyer who's basically been used by her fiance for years now. He's kind of been stringing her along. She realizes that she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life with this man, but everything's been paid for. The venue, the flowers, the catering, everything is too late to kind of cancel. And she reads in a magazine that and the new trend is to throw yourself a treintañera, your second quince when you hit 30. She's about to hit 30 the day after the wedding was scheduled to take place, and so she decides to throw herself double quince. So all the discussions of the meaning of quinceañeras in Latinx cultures is really interesting. Every country has slightly different traditions when it comes to quinceañeras, so it was really cool to hear from an Argentinian kind of perspective. It's set in Utah. The hero owns the wedding venue where the wedding's supposed to take place, and it turns out that he is kind of the one that got away for her. They've had this really intense connection when they were in college while she was on a break with her, at the time, boyfriend, and they're reconnecting, and the sparks are still there. The heat is still there. There is no sex in here. There is a lot of sexiness because of the connection between our hero and heroine. So this was a really great read for me. And usually, with these kinds of romance novels, I have higher expectations. But I think for me was getting to see a woman who's made mistakes, who recognizes the mistakes she's made and is doing everything to kind of reset her life in a way she wants to. She's taking control of her life professionally, personally, family-wise, and is handling it, right? And a hero who is just in love from beginning to end. The hero is in love. He doesn't have to be convinced of anything. He just wants what's best for her. She has to be in the right place to kind of take that step. So this was a really great read for me. I don't know if everybody will feel that way, because I think especially for some romance readers, readers, the sex scenes have to be there. I don't need that, so this one worked for me with all the Latinx representation in it. The next book I read was an audiobook, L'Art du bonheur by the Dali Lama. This is actually a conversation between the Dalai Lama and a reporter about happiness. I've actually read this conversation in English before, and I picked up the audiobook in French just to kind of start getting back into my kind of refreshing my French skills, because it's been a while since I've read anything in French and since I've practiced any French. And so this was really short and good for just listening. So, in terms of the content, I can't say much because I wasn't listening, I wasn't reading the book for that. I just needed to hear French and in material that I already knew, so that to kind of ease into practicing my French again. The next book I finished was Black Love Matters real talk on romance, being seen, and happily ever actors. And the editor is Jessica P. Pryde, and we've got a ton of well-known Black romance writers who contributed essays to this collection. This was a really, really solid collection of essays. I buddy read this with Shannon over at That's a Poem, and it was really great to buddy read it and to read it slowly. We were taking it like real slow, and it was nice to just kind of consume an essay, be able to chat about it with somebody else, and then kind of just take our time through that. Some essays were really excellent, others were just okay, none were terrible. And some really were just really amazing. And it was what a lot of these essays do is just start a discussion about some of the issues when it comes to Black romance versus like interracial romance or queer romance or just all the other kind of subcategories of romance. So when we're talking about Black romance, we're talking about a romance novel in which all the leads, the hero or the heroine, or the heroes or heroines or the group are all Black. And getting these perspectives, particularly from Black romance writers, was particularly meaningful. A lot of them talked about their own experience becoming romance readers and then becoming writers, and kind of the challenges that they face throughout the steps. So I had a ball with that. So the next book I finished was Lakewood by Megan Giddings. And this is a book that's a kind of sci-fi-ish story. You're following a Black student who is desperate for money because her mom has disabilities and can't work, and so she's really the main provider for her mom because her grandmother has now passed away. At the same time, though, she's a college student and she's handling her classes and her family responsibilities, and money would be really useful. That's when she gets a letter inviting her to take part in kind of medical experiments. And the people running these medical experiments won't tell her exactly what she's signing up for until she signs an NDA and all of that stuff. That's where the sci-fi-ish elements are in. But all of those elements were based on real history. Like, not the actual medical experiments, but the fact that the US government has experimented on Black bodies. I teach that in my courses. I teach this history. So the book didn't feel sci-fi to me. It's a horror book. Okay, it's a horror book. And what I mean when I talk about horror, there was a TikToker. I'll post a link to that video in the description, because this is a brilliant TikToker who is doing her master's in literature in England. And she did a great video explaining the differences between horror and terror in literature. And I'm like, this is not a book that's gonna give you jumps. This is a book that derives its horror from the everyday, from the realistic, from things that are very real and visceral, even though the setting is sci-fi. And this is a book that I initially gave it 4 stars, but the more I think about this book, the more I want to up the stars. I think this is a 5-star book for me. The ending is a bit open-ended, and not all readers are going to be into that, but I am finding that I like open endings in some books, and I think in this one it was very appropriate. But I know some people, are allergic to open endings, so that just an FYI. The second to last book I read was Heartberries by Terese Marie Maihot. This is a memoir written by Maihot, who's an Indigenous woman, and it's about this period in her life and the mental health crisis she has. It starts off with her admitting herself into an institution. It starts a little bit earlier, actually. It starts with her in this relationship. And it really, I think in this memoir, she's really exploring the relationships she has with her mother, with her ex-husband, with the man she loves, and how devastating those relationships were to her mental health. It was really powerful. It's always really powerful when you hear people describe what it's like to be in this in a moment of mental health crisis, where they feel like they can't control aspects of their lives. And the way that she writes it in this one was really scary and powerful. So if you're interested in memoirs that deal with the issue of mental health, I think this is a really good one. And then the last book that I managed to sneak into my May reading was Misophobe by Kimberly Lemming. Kimberly Lemming wrote That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, which kind of was doing the rounds on TikTok, on Book Talk, and was a really fun read. Misophobe is a novella within the same world, and it was perfect. I tend to not like novellas because if I like the characters and the plot, a novella is too short. You're not spending enough time with these characters, and sometimes the pacing is just not right for me in a novella. But this one had tons of plot, tons of nice romance. The pacing was a bit rushed, but like it worked for me. This one just really worked for me. It's set in a fantasy world in which there's demons and there's witches and there's magic, and in this one you have a human who needs to go talk to a fox shifter who her dad has pissed off and has cursed her dad's business. So she needs to go negotiate with him, and ends up in a kind of fake dating / marriage situation. It's really fun. You have to be in the mood for the right kind of humor though. This is very tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic humor. If you like that in your romance novels with that element of fantasy, then you've got to pick up something by Kimberly Lemming, because I've really been enjoying her writing. So I will be reading the most recent book, which is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. You gotta, like, if the name of her books and the covers, attract you in any way, shape, or form, or look interesting in any way, shape, or form, you gotta just pick them up. That's all I've gotta say. So that is it. Those are all the books that I read in May. I'm gonna leave links to everyone I mentioned down in the description box. Let me know if you're interested in any of these books, if you've read any of these books, and that way we can talk down in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.